Exactly. So yes, as you can hear, we are recording this event. You get a little message, I think, saying where you have to agree that you're fine with that. So as I was saying, at this second event of our OREC speaker series, we are welcoming Dr. Art Hunter. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from the Royal Military College and a PhD in aeronautical engineering from the Imperial College London. He worked on spacecraft design, which I find very exciting, and was the project manager for Canadarm for the space shuttle. And I was talking with him earlier that maybe we can have a special presentation on the Canadarm. I think a lot of people would find that very interesting. He's built his own microgrid, and you will hear all about that. He's still active in providing consulting engineering services to a number of people. He is also involved with the Canadian Association for the Club of Rome. And I'm just admitting more. There we go. Familiar faces indeed. And just a second, here we go. So, and not only all that, he has designed, built, and is operating his own microgrid in Manotick. And that includes solar and geothermal energy supply combined with battery and geothermal energy storage. Also quite exciting, Art is giving tours of his microgrid, and he told me that so far he's done 142 tours. That's not a typo, I spoke to him, 142. And he's not giving up, he's doing more. So I'm hoping that we can organize for our members a few tours of his microgrid, which I think would also be very interesting. So I think without further ado, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Art for his presentation on the microgrid, his microgrid, the benefits of community grids, grid carbonization, and heat pumps. Welcome, Art Hunter.
All right, I will share my screen. I just want to indicate to all that this is in fact part of a larger presentation which I've given to other groups, which I termed the electric throttle for our energy transition. And in fact, the concluding remarks should have been the advantages of these microgrids. Of course, as we're moving into the world of electrifying everything, microgrids become very important, and the news is full of microgrids popping up in many parts of the world. And I believe in the US now there are some 460 major community microgrids. That's not just a single building. That is, in fact, in some cases, a microgrid is an entire US military base, and that can be quite extensive. But
Art, sorry, I just need to interrupt for some organizational things. If you could ask everybody to please mute yourself, because we're having some interference. So if you could mute yourself, that helps. Wonderful, thank you.
All right, and typically looking at a community microgrid, as we all know, a community is really an aggregation of multiple single buildings. And if each one of them is a microgrid, well, then you end up with a community microgrid, and that's where I'm going to be focused mainly. Now, the technologies associated with microgrids are 4 of them, and one, of course, is renewable energy, solar and wind, but they can include other forms of energy as well. But mine is purely solar as the generator. And of course, demand efficiency is very important, both in terms of passive and active things that the owner can do. The second technology, of course, is geothermal, which is used for heating and cooling using heat pumps. And there has been some considerable interest in some of the people in this audience who've requested an explanation of how a heat pump actually works. And so I will be addressing some of that. And the third technology is batteries and heat storage, because one has to store both thermal as well as electricity. Now, as we bundle these all together and we come up with a functioning single system, there's many benefits which are derived, and I've used the term sustainable abundance, because there's some very significant community benefits, and I've listed 20 of them. Many of them are not financial, but they certainly do deliver a considerable social value to the residents within that microgrid. And there is a considerable difference between the costs and the benefits, and I'll be talking a little bit about that. But when you take a look at the stakeholders and who's involved here, well, we have clearly the building owners and energy service investors like OREC, as well as community residents and the utility managers. And I'm just saying that these are really the concluding remarks to an hour-long presentation, which is available on the KCAR website, as I've indicated below. I'm going to get right into the world of heat pumps and spend a little bit of time, because it's a bit of a piece of magic, and there's a lot going on here. But once we break it down, you'll see that it's really quite understandable. Of course, heat pumps are exactly as the name says. They pump heat, and they're moving and generating energy flow all year round. You can see here from this picture that there are in fact 3 different loops. Here's the ground loop, here's the home loop, and this is the refrigeration loop in the middle. And they're connected together with heat exchangers. Now, typically we're looking at retrieving energy from the ground, and perhaps that person could be muted.
Yeah, just a second. Just a second. Just a second.
I'll unmute myself.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, now the important thing to remember is that we are taking energy from the ground, which is typically cold, somewhere in the Ottawa area. It's at 10 degrees C when you're only down a couple of meters, and that becomes energy that's coming out at a cold temperature, and I call that TC, and we're delivering it into the home at a much higher temperature, and I call that TH. So we say, how do we go and take energy that is cold and pump it up such that it's generating enough temperature and energy going into the house to keep it warm? Well, the thing that you can see in this diagram is that each of these 3 loops have a pump, and this is the circulating pump here. The refrigeration cycle has a compressor, which is really a pump, and we have in the home a ventilator fan, which is really an air pump that's moving air. And if we take a look at this one, it takes in cold ventilation air from your cold air return ducts and generates warm air into your warm air ducts. And the loops on each end are pretty understandable and straightforward. The one in the middle, of course, is the refrigeration cycle, and it's of course running on what is known as a Carnot cycle, and which in fact was the first manifestation of the second law of thermodynamics. And so let's spend a little bit of time understanding exactly what this is. You have to start somewhere in a loop, so I'm going to start up here where we have, I do want to point out that the color that is used here is, in being red, meaning it's warm gas. And as it comes down, it condenses into a liquid. The liquid is a different color. And you see the liquid, in fact, evaporating and becoming a gas. And it goes round and round in circles. So this diagram is really quite handy. It shows you exactly what's happening. And I'm going to try and put some numbers on this as we're going. Let's start here where we have a gas, which is relatively warm. Let's say it's at somewhere like 0 degrees C. And you say that's not warm. Well, it is compared to minus 20. So it comes in and it enters the compressor. And these compressors are really very efficient. They will take that air and compress it, raising the pressure and the temperature up to, say, 45 degrees C. And at very high pressure, passing that on down, and that's our T hot, 45 degrees. And that's typical because in my place, I use 45 degrees because that's the temperature I use to heat hot water, because it has to be about 40 degrees at the shower head to be comfortable. And you might have it at, say, 35 degrees going into your ducting system, but it has to be above, say, 20 degrees C, whatever the comfortable temperature setting you've got on your thermostat. But what happens to this very hot gas then? It enters this heat exchanger called a condenser, where the cold air is coming and it's passing over this coil of hot gas, and this cold air is getting warmed, and this hot gas starts to condense to the point where it literally transforms from a gas into a liquid, and we can see that it comes out at the bottom here, and it is probably sitting close to about, say, 22 degrees C from about 45 up here, but it is a liquid. So the refrigerant is very specifically selected to have a melting temperature, or at least a condensation temperature of around 30 degrees C. And so this, remember, this fluid now, or this gas or liquid, is still under high pressure. It enters into an expansion valve, and as you know, if you take a liquid or any fluid and you pass it through an expansion valve and expand it, it's going to cool, and the pressure is also going to drop. But it remains as a liquid, and that liquid could be somewhere about minus 20 degrees C. And that liquid then enters this heat exchanger, and it's called an evaporator, because it's going to evaporate this, or cause this fluid to change from a liquid into a gas again. It boils within there, and so it's going from minus 20 degrees back up to about 0 degrees. And in the process, of course, what it's doing is it's dumping a lot of cold energy going down into the ground again here. We see that this refrigeration cycle is getting work added in through the compressor. This ground loop has work added in through the circulation pump and work over in this air pump as well. Now, in the summer, what we have is a reversing valve, and if you can imagine that this is rotated 90 degrees, then all of a sudden what's coming out of the compressor now flows against the arrows, and we have then this particular heat exchanger becomes the condenser, and this one becomes the evaporator. But I won't go through that whole process showing the operation in reverse. But the important point is that I have shown here the efficiency of a Carnot cycle in terms of what is used as a coefficient of performance, and this is the formula. And if we go off and we take a look at a worst case and a best case, in the winter, I said, well, the cold temperature coming out of the ground is near freezing, and we have to pump it up to 45 degrees to heat hot water and to heat our home. And we change those into Kelvin and put it in this formula. And therefore, in theory, we should get a coefficient performance of 5.9, or that means 590% efficient in theory. But in the real world, there's losses and other things happening, which means that we don't really see the maximum. And what I have seen in my system is a coefficient of performance of 4.2. And what that really means is 1 kilowatt of electrical power equals to 4.2 kilowatts of heat that's added. And so the bigger that number, coefficient of performance, the better off you are economically. In the summer, things are really good, because if the ground is still at 0 degrees C, which is what typically happens, that we store cool through the winter, and it remains in the ground through to summertime, and when air conditioning starts, it's still around 0 degrees C, which is really good, because we only have to pump that up to about 15 degrees, which says that's the temperature of the air coming out of your duct at 15 degrees. So we're literally pumping energy up from the ground temperature of 0 up to 15. And any of the excess heat that's left over is, of course, taken and put back into the ground. And we start storing that up for use next winter. But when we have temperatures of a cold temperature of 0 degrees, and we're only going up to 15, just look at the coefficient performance. Well, that generates, 1,920% efficiency. And but what I typically see is around 13, because there's losses and things in there. But what it's really saying is we get 1 kilowatt of electrical power, which we're drawing from the grid, but we're getting equivalent of 13 kilowatts of heat removal. Now, we'll go back to this and say, look, what happens if I was to increase this temperature to 5 degrees C? Well, all of a sudden, you start seeing even greater efficiencies than indicated here. And the coefficient of performance can go very much higher. The same with this. If the temperature was 5 degrees C here, you're only pumping it up 40 degrees C instead of 45, and the efficiency would go up. I point this out because what happens in the real world is that the temperature of the coal, the TC, is constantly changing. It changes not just from season to season, but month to month, day to day, and in fact, even hourly. And so these coefficients of performance that are listed here, they're just there momentarily for a few minutes, and then they start to change. So what is it that we can do to try and maximize this coefficient of performance? Well, we have to maximize the difference between these two. Pushing them closer together is a very good idea. It means that you don't have to pump the energy as high, and you'll get better performance and hence greater cost savings in your heating and cooling. And of course, when you say, well, what is a major thing you can do? Well, I rather like the idea of putting the ground heat exchanger into a river. Now, that would say that this T-cold is constantly somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees C. The same with the summer, it's between 5 and 10 degrees C, and you're going to get far better coefficients of performance. So unfortunately, I don't have a river right next to me, and I have to use the ground. And so what are the benefits that come from all this? We take a look at my microgrid, where I'm in the business of digitizing, electrifying, and decarbonizing. And you see, my energy requirement for the year is about 82%, and in thermal, whereas I only need about 18% of my energy consumption in electricity. And down here, I've indicated with the orange color what is in fact heat and cold, whereas the black lines indicate electricity. I've got these in this block diagram lined up as demand, storage, and sources and sinks. On the demand side, of course, there's lighting, cooking, computing, appliances, and all those things that you use in your home. And I have an electric car. In fact, I got 2 of them, and I have to charge those up. So they're drawing on energy. And of course, the other demands are heating and cooling, which we've just addressed, as well as hot water. And on the storage side, I've got home batteries, Tesla Powerwall batteries. I got 3 of those that are sitting in my basement. And if in fact we ever get approval from the IESO and the grid managers, I look forward to plugging my vehicle in and getting a bunch more battery storage from my Tesla car. And of course, the other storage is ground storage, which I've talked about. And this ground storage temperature is, of course, quite dynamic, as I've indicated in the earlier slide. Sources and sinks. Well, I have solar panels. I'm also connected to the grid, but I can control that. I can island. That's what these switches are here, which means I can isolate. I can do that either manually or it is done automatically with software. And I also have a telephone app that I can isolate as I wish. I put in a bridge here, which I call a heater. Well, it is a heater. And anybody wants to come and do a tour, I'll show you this heater. And it's just a small hot water tank that I use, and specifically interface with the geothermal heat pump. And this allows me to take excess electrical energy and increase the temperature in my ground storage. And of course, the dotted lines just indicate that there's management computers that are controlling all these parts and making them all work as a system. Now, the advantages. Clearly, the biggest advantage of a community microgrid is cost. And because we're often, and I like the term farming the sun and extracting geothermal energy, but the winners are clearly the owners of the microgrid, as well as the consumers or the residents. The utilities make out very well, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And as well as the microgrid technology industry. Bear in mind all the components that I showed you in terms of heat pumps and compressors and reversing valves, etc., as well as the heat exchangers are undergoing R&D and improving in their efficiency all the time. And as that happens, those coefficients of performance are constantly going up. And of course, if as this gets spread around, the government doesn't have to provide as big a subsidies to consumers as well. I talk about energy inflation because we all know that our utility bills have a constant pressure on it to grow. And so I talk about cost growth avoidance. And in fact, what happens, and the literature is full of it, says, hey, you can get costs of delivered power, which is somewhere between 50 and 70% lower than the utility can provide it to you. And the trends are to still make it lower again by all the R&D that's going on in the equipment that's used within microgrids. Social and wealth equity. Well, energy really doesn't care what race, creed, color, religion you have. There's no biases. I mean, it's bias free, and it's generating jobs and homes as well as safety, particularly in terms of keeping your food and fresh water and keeping you warm. Now, number 4 says, well, reliability certainly goes up, and this provides for a secure energy future. While it's producing, a safer shelter, and safety, comes up many times because this is very important at a level that is very sensitive to each individual. And I use the term survivability. And this is, if you make an investment, of course, in any of this equipment, clearly it has an insurance value of some type. And that's something that you can evaluate yourself, because we know that atmospheric heating is not finished. It's going to continue to grow, and we're going to be in for some more rather shocking changes in the future. Now, I'd like to talk in terms of social liberation from the fragile grid and the resilience, of course, that microgrids provide. We know that when we have a climate fuel disaster, the first thing to go wrong is the telephone poles start dropping and the grid goes out, and we have outages, which are clearly inconvenient. Is a mild term, and with many people it's much more damaging than that. Fear, frustration. They have flooding basements, and they lose everything in their refrigerators, etc. And there's health impacts. And if you happen to be on some some of the machines that are available to keep you healthy, well, and they're not functioning, it could be more catastrophic than just inconvenient. And therefore, we should be looking at providing a safer infrastructure for all those reasons. Now, what happens with people that are in a community microgrid? Well, they become very energy aware, and they know that there's a continual decrease in energy costs from microgrid and the renewable, and this of course then provides you know, some livelihood opportunities, because you're in fact saving money. And of course, this means that communities themselves now can generate their own technology-based distributed energy, electricity, and join together to make virtual power plants, put a number of microgrids together, and hence you can then start trading energy with your next door neighbors or your other communities. The other, of course, number 8 here is, of course, the issue associated with using fossil fuels, which are commodity-based generators to generate electricity, and that has noise and smell implications, which I'm sure everyone's aware of. And if you can avoid that, that's a good thing. Now, community microgrid number 9 here provides communities the ability to manage their own energy consumption and to reinvest the profits in whatever they wish, whatever the community objectives are, and for added flexibility and of course the ability to be free. I like this term, freedom, from a centralized, politically driven grid where the decisions are made many thousands of kilometers from your home, and you have no say in it. And number 10 addresses a very important one as well, which, you know, is community pride. That the people within the microgrid, in fact, we become aware of their energy democracy, and they're quite willing to brag to everyone who's not in their microgrid in terms of the comfort and convenience and the long-term livability, as well as the economic development that they're accruing. And that pride is quite important in a community. And oops, wrong way. And number 11 is this concept of energy arbitrage, which really means that communities can buy and sell. You buy energy at night when the energy prices are low, and you sell it back to the grid once the energy prices are high. That's typically between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. every day, as people are leaving work, going home to make dinner, and that's when the clubs open and restaurants, etc. Energy rises very dramatically, and the demand goes up and the price goes up. And from the number 12, from the perspective of the utility, like Hydro Ottawa and Hydro One in our area, it provides stability, because the folks in the utilities are in a constant development mode as new communities are being added on, and population is growing, housing demand is going up, and there's new communities and buildings going up, and these folks have to provide power to it. And if they don't have to worry about microgrids, because they're they're not adding to the confusion and the design update. Hence, there's congestion issues are really relieved for them. And of course, if it means they don't have to have more telephone poles, that means fewer telephone poles that are going to get dropped at the next extreme weather event. So their repair cost delays or avoidance are quite substantial, and they're aware of that. Item 13, this is generates the concept of community of communities, whereby once you do get together with your community next door, you end up with having multiple communities, having a community of communities, which in essence, if you take it to an extreme, could be the entire city. And this gives you the opportunity then to trade energy with other communities, depending on their supply and demand requirements and yours. For sure, they're all going to be different. And in fact, this has been demonstrated, particularly in the US and parts of Europe, where these communities do get together, and there's no losers. And of course, can't forget that the number 14 is of course reducing pollution, and in fact working with nature, do no harm, and to stop this destruction of nature, become part of it and live with it, and in fact thrive. And microgrids provide that. Now, 15 talks about the desire, at least I have very strongly, and I think most people do once you think about it, is you want the ability to survive, and as I call it, prepare to survive. And so in the planning process, you're or at least I'm constantly looking for operational ways that I can improve my microgrid. And I've found some very interesting things have happened, that when the power has gone out and I'm the only house on the block with the lights on, that becomes almost like a cultural center. People come in and want to hang out with their neighbors rather than sit there in the cold and the dark by themselves. And it's a way that the community comes together and survives together, which is very beneficial. And now we're in item 16, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Well, just stop burning. Microgrids, my microgrid, I don't burn anything. And for those folks who are really interested in trying to mitigate climate change and simultaneously with adaptation to the changing conditions, microgrids are perfect. They do both. Shelter security, of course, when the power goes out, if you have any alarms and motion detectors, those will not work, except with a microgrid. Of course, they're still functional, and of course it also provides for the fact that you still have your internet connection and you can communicate to the outside world. And cybersecurity is perhaps not a major issue here in Ottawa, but you speak to the folks in Ukraine and they'll give you another story. What's happened here? And number 18 is, of course, the electric vehicle to grid connectivity. I'd like to look at an EV as a battery on wheels, which incidentally can also be used as a car. And the the battery is everything, because it can be used, in fact, to distribute energy, and you can fill it up, drive it to some place which needs energy, and plug it in there. But right now, EV vehicle to grid connectivity has not been approved here in Ontario, and in fact that's coming in the future, and that will have some interesting effect on return on investment to those who have a battery on wheels. Number 19 is to isolate and protect yourself from the power quality in the utility. Typically, what happens when the power goes out, there's voltage spikes which come down the line, and they can damage TV sets, computers, electronics, and other things you've got connected in there. And you want to be able to island yourself, just disconnect totally from the grid, and wait till everything settles down, and then reconnect to the grid. Now, I want to save the best one to the last, and that's number 20 here, which really addresses Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is quality of life, your well-being, mental stress, loneliness, isolation, your value system. All those are all rolled into this hierarchy of needs, and community microgrids provide a great deal of that, and such that people then do not have to worry about the very fundamentals of survivability, and can get on with the other important aspects of their social lives. And I just want to point out that this, of course, is the conclusion to a much larger presentation I've made, which was really addressing the all the aspects of microgrids, and in fact it is available as a presentation that was given to the Carleton Federation of the Liberal Party, the CFLA Association, and they were very interested in understanding all this. And that concludes this quick review of community microgrids, and I'm open to questions.
Hey, thank you so much for this in-depth presentation, Art. Are there any questions from the audience? Let me start with that. You're all muted, so if you do have a question, please unmute yourself first. I have Luke is raising his hand, so Luke, why don't you just go ahead?
He was clapping.
Yes, now you're unmuted. Hi, Luke. Luke, now you're muted again. Okay. Are there, I'm looking for hands that are up. No.
Oh, sorry, Marian. I was just clapping and not raising my hand. I apologize.
Oh.
And I was on the wrong microphone too. Sorry.
Right. That's also good. I see, Paul, you're connecting to audio. I'm wondering if that means you might have a question. Okay, there is Ketan, I hope that's the right way to pronounce your name. I see you raise your hand, so do you want to go ahead with your question?
Sure. Art, very interesting. Nice to connect again. Could you speak to, most people in the city have natural gas. What about yourself? Do you have any need for natural gas for heat in the winter?
No, I don't. I'm totally fossil fuel free. I even got rid of my propane barbecue. So I do not burn fossil fuels. I'm totally electrified.
Okay, excellent. Are you on the edge though in the winter?
on the edge.
with the
Well,
heat pump?
no, not at all. The heat pump, as I indicated in the slide, the ground temperature gets down to around 2 or 3 degrees. It doesn't freeze,
I see.
and it doesn't get any colder than that. So my coefficient of performance is 4.2. That's 420%. So that's the edge to me, I guess.
I guess,
That is as low of performance that I get.
and can you compare, I think with a ground source heat pump, you'd expect that, but can you compare that to an air source heat pump? Someone with an air source heat pump who doesn't have the budget or, to do ground source, how would you compare the two?
Oh, well, an air source heat pump again. Maybe I'll just share my screen again, because this is quite important. That if you look here, it's this temperature difference. You want to get up to 45 degrees C as your hot temperature, but if you're outside, your cold temperature is minus 20 degrees, then you got to pump it up 65 degrees.
Right.
Therefore, your coefficient of performance is going to go down.
So where does it get to, like 2?
Oh, it'll get down close to 1. And therefore, the air-to-air heat pumps, typically when it gets really cold like that, will in fact revert to resistive heaters, because there's no advantage in running a pump.
Right.
But then again, recognize that you say, how many hours in the day is or in the year is the temperature below 25 degrees C? And you might see a few hours at night, January, February timeframe, and let's say for a total of, wild guess, 30 hours a year that it's going to be that cold. And you can live with that. That is not a major driver. The point is, what you want to do is try and maintain this TC as high as you can, and minus 25 is not high.
Got it. Thanks, Raymond.
I saw some raised hands, and
Peter
we have Peter Meinke. He raised his hand first, I think, and then we have Dick Bucker. Peter, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you very much. And first of all, congratulations, Art. That was a fantastic presentation. You did an excellent job of getting a very complex issue, concepts across, and pointing out the issues. I would like to stress.
It's the Canadian Association of the Club of
Sorry,
Rome.
can you please
Derek,
mute yourself? Other
Yeah,
than
he did.
Just today.
Yeah, okay.
I would like to stress two things. First of all, the importance of getting this message out and getting people to understand what heat pumps are really doing. There is a mental block in people, and I think Art's done a lot to overcome that. You may have seen the recent discussion in the web about why are they named heat pumps? They should be renamed. But it's really important to get that message out about how good this is. This is really, really important. And I can't imagine how frustrated Art must be over the years trying to convince people He's shown, as you said, 142 things. And I don't know how many of those people went out and actually put in this kind of system he has. I would love to do it. Unfortunately, I am at the point of selling my house, and I just am not going to be able to invest it for that. But the other thing is, it's not just getting that message out, it's actually providing the support to the people. I mean, you know, if you want to put in solar panels, you go to a solar panel installer like Gaetan with Jazz Solar. And I did that many years ago. But there isn't that facility for people who want to put in what Art has put in. And we need a company, we need something out there. And I think OREC, if I may say, has an important role to play. You play an important role in finding financing for solar, do that for microgrids, but also we've got to encourage somehow or other a good establishment of a company or several companies that can do this. I went into the Home Depot the other day. I was going to put in a small heat pump and I asked about heat pump. They didn't even know what it was in Home Depot. So, you know, there is a real education issue here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I went on so long, but I'm as tied up as Art in this.
Good. Thank you, Peter.
Could I just respond quickly?
Absolutely.
I of course used a different installer. I used Isolera, and they were the folks that provided me with the Tesla home batteries, the power walls, as well as the solar and the necessary control systems and what have you. So there are suppliers out there, and I guess the issue really is, are they well known? And I think the answer is no, and that's part of your frustration, Peter, I'm sure.
Dick, I think you raised your hand next, and then I have Richard. So Dick, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. Thank you very much, Art. That was very well done. A key part of the heat pump is the insulation of the building. How old is your house? And did you have to do a major upgrade to the insulation as you went through these steps of generation and storage and electrification?
Yes, indeed. And again, I'll do a quick share and take you to my introduction here. That in fact, I talk here about demand efficiency. You know, this is both passive and active in terms of, and this is where insulation comes in, and it's you know, related to but not directly connected to heat pumps, but it's passive efficiency. And what I have done is I have put in new windows and doors. I've put in, you know, my windows are triple glazed, argon filled, triple OE or double OE, and well sealed, and I've added more insulation into my attic, and that has helped retain the energy in the house much better, and hence the heat pump doesn't have to run as often. And so it goes. So yes, I did go off and do some passive upgrades on my house that was built in 2002.
Thank you.
We have Richard. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Marion, and thank you, Art, for your presentation. You and I know each other well. We've been working on microgrid for Manor Park for some time. I still think it's really important when we're talking about these sort of concepts. We have to demonstrate or even talk about the cost of the different components in a presentation. So when you talk about a heat pump, how much is that? How much is the installation? How much? We had Isolair actually come to our house this year. They did a whole review of our house and looked at our energy costs and so forth. And they came back, they said their engineers looked at it and said, it's not worth your while, don't do solar panels. Then we went to heat pumps. We actually, 3 different companies, again, looking for heat pumps at our house, looking at, is it worthwhile? And they said, well, your furnace is still good. You're still good for another 7 years with your furnace. It's not worth your while. So we were dissuaded from doing a heat pump. Whereas I really wanted to go something green, if you want to call it that. And after many attempts this year, I was dissuaded. So I'll hold on to that.
Yeah, well, I guess I often run into this, and this is this concept that says I can't afford it, and because we're have this concept of return on investment that says I must see an actual dollar return. I don't live in a world of dollars. I live in a world of energy, kilowatt hours. And I look at the number of kilowatt hours which are saved. I also look at all those other 20 attributes, which says, is insurance value worth something? That's not in your return on investment. You know, is Maslow's theory, is that worth something? Peace of mind, well-being? You know, you can't put a dollar value on that. And I don't even try. In fact, I've gone the other way that said, if I had gone and tried to do this development based purely on financial return on investment, I would be just like you. I wouldn't have done it. But I did it, and because I recognized all these other social benefits, and it has now become a point where I am saving energy. I'm not buying electricity, I'm not buying natural gas, I'm not buying gasoline, and in fact, I'm selling energy to the Hydro One, and I call this an embarrassment of riches. My bank account kept going up, and so that's when I said, what am I going to? Money's no good to me. Energy's of value to me. And so that's when I went and bought a Tesla Model 3 and happily got into debt again. And now I can, I mean, I didn't do that on a pure dollar return on investment, not at all.
Yeah.
But it's up to you. It's up to everybody to make that decision themselves.
Mm-hmm. I am not seeing any other hands coming up. Raymond. Yeah, Raymond, you have another question. Go ahead. Wait, first question.
Oops, sorry if you can't see me there. I guess the lights aren't on at home. Trying to save electricity.
In the background.
So just wanted to point out that our arts project is, I call it a bit of a science experiment, but reality is that solutions like what he's built over time are slowly becoming commercially available. And in terms of return on investment, if you would have done this 20 years ago, you probably would have spent much more than what you would ever potentially save. But given the cost of solar and the other technologies, these solutions are becoming more and more economically viable just from an economic point of view, right? So forget about all the other stuff. Just from a pure economic point of view, they're becoming very, very attractive. So that's good news for all of us.
I can only agree. Thank you.
Wonderful. Do I see any further questions? No, I think not. Well, Art, I'm repeating what previous participants said. Thank you so very much for this presentation. It's been most informative, and I guess the sort of the concept that really resonates with me is that of energy democracy, because that's ultimately really what OREC is about as well, right? So it's impressive what you've set up at your Manatic microgrid. And I certainly hope that we can have maybe tour 150 at your at your facility. I think there was a lot of interest, and it would be great if we can organize something for our members. I would certainly appreciate that. So thank you very much, Art. And this, I think another point I would like to mention also. As OREC, we are trying to put together these speaker events about once a month. So if there are any topics that you are interested in, any speakers that you can recommend, we'd be happy to hear from you at info@orec.ca. But I do see that Richard raised his hand. So Richard, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that Art and I have been working on developing a microgrid for Manor Park. We already have met with Ottawa Hydro and the city, and they were supportive, and Roger knows about it actually. But we've also met with the developer, and the developer is very supportive of this whole concept because they're doing a massive development in Manor Park over the next 15 years. And so there is buy-in.
Can I clarify, was that are or are not? Are supportive?
They are supportive, very. And so we are moving forward with that concept. And I only came up with that idea after hearing Art speak. So thanks to Art, I said, gee, maybe we could have a community microgrid in Manor Park, you know, so. Absolutely. And piggyback it on all the development that's going on in this region, because they're building thousands and thousands of new units and rebuilding, you know, thousands more. So it'll be happening, and we're going to be building on the expertise of people like Art and Roger and so forth.
That is fantastic. I'm aware and happy to hear that you are involved in that project, because I think it's important. It's an important tool for people to see this concept in being realized, and it's an educational process as well, I think, right? So it's fantastic that you are involved in that in the Manor Park conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, so and maybe that would be a topic for another presentation, and I'll come back to you on that.
Okay, and with that, I'll stop the recording. People don't have to leave. We can still talk.
Yes, absolutely. So again,